My name is Curtis McManus. I'm a writer and historian based in Canada. This video series is an adaptation and compression of my written work where I've dealt at length and in detail with the culture wars generally and the progressive mind and the progressive worldview in particular. The goal of this video series is the same as that of my books, to provide a clearer picture as to the nature, origin, and source of the progressive mind, of the progressive worldview. Now, there's no shortage of information about the progressives and what they're currently doing to the West, but much of this information either misses or ignores the essential points entirely, and that leaves us with an understanding of the progressive mind that is hazy, it is unclear, it lacks clarity. For example, there's a lot of talk these days about postmodernism and Marxism and neo-Marxist postmodernism, and this is all well and good, it's valuable, it's a necessary corrective to the discussion currently occurring in the public square. But I wonder at its profitability. I myself know academics who have taught in the academy for 2, upwards of 3 decades, and even after all that time, when asked, they cannot clearly define what exactly postmodernism is. So this series is going to answer 4 basic yet fundamental questions. Who are the progressives? Where do they come from? What do they want? And crucially, I think, why is it that they think the way that they do? And the answers to all 4 of these questions are embedded directly into the content of this video series, beginning with part 1. Part 1 of this series will begin with an exploration of the concept of nihilism and how that concept has manifested itself at various times throughout modern Western history. And for your reference, I date modern Western history as beginning in 1789 with the French Revolution. Understanding this concept is critical, it is crucial. When we encounter a progressive, what we're actually encountering is a nihilist. Now, I'm not talking about small L liberals immediately to my political left. I'm talking further up the political spectrum. I'm talking about the hard left, the radical left, the progressive left. The further down the political spectrum you go, the deeper the nihilism becomes. Nihilism lay at the core of every single revolutionary movement that has occurred since 1789, from the Jacobins to the revolutionists of '48 to the Bolsheviks to the Maoists to the Castroistas to the progressives today. If we scrape away the particulars of their philosophy, we find nihilism at its core. And make no mistake, what we're living through right now is not a culture war. I know we frequently refer to it as a culture war, but it's not a war. It's a revolution, and it always has been. In part 2, we'll look at the progressive conception of history, their historical consciousness, and this is hugely important for understanding who and what progressives are, because virtually everything that they say, think, and do is animated by this understanding that they have of what history is and where they fit in relation to it. Progressives of today and the revolutionaries of the past share in this basic idea in which they see history as ascendatory. They see history as something that is moving upward and forward toward a goal, toward a final destination, toward an endpoint, that there is a desirable state of affairs that lay in the not too distant future. And this belief that they can push history forward is the sort of fuel that has animated every progressive revolutionary movement since 1789. Now, this is an understanding of history, this is a historical consciousness that is long past its best before date. This understanding or this way of appreciating history no longer accords, it no longer fits with what's happening in the modern West in the 21st century. And so in part 2, I'll outline or rough sketch an alternative to the progressive understanding of history, and which revolves around the cycles of history. In part 3, we'll look at the progressive type, not progressive philosophy, but the progressive type, the progressive character, the progressive expression form. It's remarkable to consider, but the progressive type has not changed, not fundamentally, in the 230 some odd years since the French Revolution. Their ideas, their assumptions, their beliefs, their attitudes remain essentially the same. And in part 3, we'll go through the writings of English philosopher Edmund Burke, who in 1790 wrote his Reflections on the Revolution in France, and he provides us with a wonderful character sketch, a wonderful psychology of the progressive type, which again has not changed since 1789. It is still fundamentally the same. In part 4, I'll end the series with an exploration of dying cultures. Since we live in a dying culture, I thought it appropriate to end on this note. Now, this has nothing to do with apocalypse, this has nothing to do with the doomsday scenario or any other such thing. Many writers, historians, and philosophers throughout Western history have written about the characteristics associated with decaying, degenerating, dying cultures. Arnold Toynbee, Oswald Spengler, Friedrich Nietzsche, Alexis de Tocqueville, all the way back to Plato, Aristotle, and it makes its way into the works of Greco-Roman historian Polybius, as well as the wonderful moral and ethical philosophy of Marcus Aurelius. There is nothing new here. I take it as a given. I assume it to be true without needing to prove it so, that all cultures die. In 5,000 years of recorded human history, there has never been a culture or a civilization that has not been subject to this basic rule, that all cultures eventually die. They degenerate, they decay, they become culturally exhausted. And so I am simply assuming that the modern West is not unique, it is not special in any way, and it is subject to that same rule. So this is where we're headed over the course of this video series. I am not a professional YouTuber, nor do I wish to become such. When this video series is at an end, so too is my involvement on this platform, on this channel. However, if subscribing to the channel makes it easier or simpler for you to be alerted when the next video comes out, please go ahead and subscribe. I would ask that if you like this series, go ahead and give it a thumbs up or a like, or share it with somebody you know. Otherwise, we'll see you soon for part 1. Nihilism is progress, and progressives as nihilists.